Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 11th of November, 2022, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today, we've got Patrick Henningsen and Vanessa Beeley. Welcome to the programme, both. Now, we're going to get straight on very quickly with, well, the economy and, the UK, the Office for National Statistics has announced that UK's GDP is down 0.2% in the period July to September 2022. And, of course, all the mainstream headlines talking about us entering recession. The Bank of England believing we're going to enter the longest running recession in history. ONS says that the quarterly fall was driven by manufacturing, which saw widespread declines across most industries. Services were flat overall, but consumer-facing industries fared badly, with a notable fall in retail. I think we haven't seen anything just yet, but don't worry, Jeremy Hunt is riding to the rescue, although he does say that there's no illusion. There's a tough road ahead, one which requires extremely difficult decisions to restore confidence and economic stability. So things not looking so great in the UK. But just to make the point here, Patrick, if we look at GDP in the UK over the last several decades, really what we see is we have not yet recovered from the economic collapse 2008, but equally the government economic decisions around COVID, and GDP still has not reached levels, or it hadn't reached levels above those just in the run up to the lockdowns and so on in early 2020. And since we've headed south again, we're not likely to for some time to come. But in the US, it's a very similar picture.
Yeah, I think both the all economies, European, UK, and US, and Canada as well, are going to be suffering from stagflation, which is a stagnant economy. Nobody wants to use the big R word, which is recession, which used to mean 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, and now they're just expunged it from the vocabulary altogether because nobody wants to own that politically. So, stagnant economy plus creeping inflation, and a lot of things that are driving inflation are to do with, for instance, fuel and energy. And the governments do not seem to have any solutions to that, or they're not implementing any policies that are going to radically reverse that. So we're creeping along. And meanwhile, a lot of prices of staples are compounding. So the month on month or year on year inflation is actually compounding as we speak. So that's not going to make life any easier for anybody who's struggling to make ends meet each month, because I don't see the pay rises coming that correspond with the rises in food and essential goods, fuel, and energy.
Indeed, but of course, one of the big economic problems we've been facing for a couple of years now has been the lack of availability, supply side problems, and China a big part of that with their continuing COVID zero policy. But RT here reporting that China's perhaps easing that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think there seems to be a sea change in thinking in China. They've been absolutely devastated. I mean, China has to balance two things, which is keeping control of society, but also keeping their economy ticking along. And the zero COVID policy is just being seen as one of the things that has been devastating for the Chinese economy. So I think they're rethinking this, and so this is covering this. It's one of the only news outlets I found that is covering this. So I know the British government will deem this as Russian propaganda, but here we're going to put it up. So the global markets have responded to a change in Chinese COVID policy. This is really important, and so there are other factors around, including the U.S. election, that might have caused the markets to react positively, just because people know where things are going in the next couple of months or the next quarter. But when China does a major policy shift on something like COVID, i.e., lockdowns and shutting down Beijing or Shanghai, for instance, and the markets react positively to it, this is really encouraging because it might send a message to other governments that maybe this is what you need to do right now going forward in this situation, and not this winter pursue sort of draconian policies that might destroy economic growth and disrupt supply chains and all the rest of it. So I think for China, I don't think there's room to maneuver economically, considering the trade war, the diplomatic war with the United States, and also with other countries in Europe who adopting a more strident policy towards China for whatever geopolitical reasons. This is one area that China can alleviate some of its economic issues.
Yes. Okay, let's move on to Ukraine then. And well, here's Rishi looking very moody. This is him speaking, apparently, according to the UK government, speaking to Zelensky this morning. And they agreed that they say that they agreed that any Russian withdrawal from the occupied city of Kherson would demonstrate strong progress for Ukrainian forces and reinforce the weakness of Russia's military offensive. But it was right to continue to exercise caution until the Ukrainian flag was raised over the city. So the rhetoric from the UK is as it usually is. In the meantime, Ben Wallace and Rishi Sunak have announced. Here's Ben Wallace with his Ukrainian counterpart. They have announced that the UK is going to complete the delivery of 1,000 additional surface-to-air missiles for the Ukrainian military. The commitment of hundreds more surface-to-air missiles continues our defensive support for Ukraine against Russian aggression and will help Ukraine counter the threat from illegal targeting of critical national infrastructure, is what Ben Wallace had to say. In the meantime, then the JEF was getting together, and here they all are, the various countries involved in this. So this is the Joint Expeditionary Force, and we've got Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom all represented there. And at that meeting, then they announced that the Netherlands is going to contribute another 100 million euros to the International Fund for Ukraine, and Norway about 145 million euros to the International Fund for Ukraine. So, Patrick, the funding continues, the arms continue to roll in, and therefore the war continues.
Yeah, we're approaching what we called a frozen conflict. This sort of situation where the status quo is something much like the Cold War or, North Korea, South Korea. Russia's quite aware of all of these arms shipments. They're calculating this in, they're tracking them, and so forth. And the reality is that anything that's brought into Ukraine can be sort of, liquidated very quickly through Russian missile strikes and things like that. So and by the way, they're also aware of how long it takes for these things to cycle in. A lot of the commitments, like for instance, the U.S. has made for Ukraine in terms of more HIMAR missiles or more sort of defense equipment and gear and so forth. A lot of this stuff is going to be on back order for the next year, maybe two. So not everything is going to make it to the field. A lot of this is also political. These announcements are political. They need to show their support for Ukraine to kind of keep morale up. You can see that this was a big motivation for the U.S. To say that they wanted to pursue peaceful negotiations with between Russia and sort of because they didn't want the European partners to lose heart. You can see so much of this is politics and PR at this point. In terms of strategy, things are hardening on the ground there, and positions are hardening, and we might be getting into a situation where you could see negotiations. But meanwhile, all of this gear and all of these sort of defense agreements, which have been great profit centers for Western defense contractors, they'll just keep on trying to roll these in as they go along.
Indeed. And speaking of politics and particularly PR, Vanessa, then we had Sean Penn. We just mentioned this in passing on Wednesday, but I mean, gifting an Oscar to Zelensky, how far does the PR have to roll on?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, this is Sean Penn's third visit. Of course, he's not the only celebrity that has appeared in the company of Zelensky, but Penn has a very extensive history of appearing in the right country at the right time for the oligarchs and the billionaire complex in the United States. And here we don't see any different. Of course, what I find quite extraordinary here, we've got a little video to show him presenting his Oscar to Zelensky. I did see quite a funny comment on Twitter that, well, that'll be melted down and put into the coffers for Zelensky's retirement. and with Penn stating that he hopes to see Zelensky in Malibu once Ukraine has won the war, of course. But I don't know if you have the video ready, Mike.
Yeah, let's play it.
You're looking good. Thank you.
This is for you.
Oh, Sean.
Yes.
No.
Please.
That is yours.
No, I feel terrible outside. It's just a symbolic, silly thing.
Yes, but
if I know this is here with you, then I'll feel better and stronger for the fight.
So great honor, but until we will.
When you win, bring it back to Malibu.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Because I'll feel
Okay.
much better knowing there's a piece of me here.
It's not from me. It's from Ukraine. That is more important than not only from me. Yeah, please.
The President of Ukraine for outstanding delivery. Thank you.
And I want to show you the first man who was here was this guy. I think you know him. Come back. That is the date, and here you can read if you don't know this guy. That is a great honor today.
There are 3 places in the world that all the pride of my life will be. The place where my daughter was born, the place where my son was born, and this. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, not much more I can add to that, to be honest. I did mention, I mean, Sean Penn, I wrote about previously in relation to COVID-19 and celebrity humanitarianism. Sean Penn is the epitome of that. His core response organization was running mobile PCR centers across the United States. And of course, he was instrumental in pushing the COVID narrative throughout the project's existence. But what I'm coming to here, and Pan is very closely involved in what I'm working on for UK Column, and this is just a bit of a teaser for people. The article hopefully will finally be finished this weekend and published next week. Back in March 2022, Josh Rogan wrote an article for the Washington Post, referenced the Syrian white helmets are ready to help Ukrainians save civilians under Russian attacks. We have seen, if people followed the Syria conflict and followed the exploits of the white helmets and MI6, military intelligence incubated organization embedded with the terrorist groups inside Syria and tasked with producing the chemical weapon attack stories in order to criminalize the Syrian government, the last being the Douma chemical attack in 2018, which was discredited by the OPCW inspectors who went on the ground to investigate the alleged attack. Basically, what we've been seeing more recently in Ukraine, are particularly in Kiev, are very similar productions, TV productions, news productions on the alleged Russian attacks on civilian infrastructure. We saw a couple that were exposed to be real-time fake attacks. Now, this is very similar to the White Helmet operations in Syria. What I'm writing about, which is based on documents leaked to myself and to UK Column, that both Canada and the United States are looking at funding for the White Helmets to get more involved in Ukraine. And one can only assume they're not going to go to Ukraine, but what they will be doing is offering advice and assistance to the Ukrainians, we assume to the NATO-backed elements within Ukraine that are fighting Russia. We're seeing them anyway promoting the Azov battalions and the anti-Russia rhetoric from inside Syria. Sean Penn is closely connected, of course, through various channels but also people might remember him being used by the BBC to effectively discredit those that had exposed the role of the white helmets inside Syria. So I'm just drawing together a few of the threads. Other threads are Kosovo, another connection to Kosovo amongst those that are backing the white helmet moves to be more involved in Ukraine. So watch this space next week.
Okay, thank you for that, Vanessa. Now let's move on to back to the UK, and UK government pushing this out this morning. The UK has sanctioned £18.3 billion of Russian assets, and they're saying that this is new data which has been released yesterday, revealing the full effect of UK sanctions on Russia. They're not discussing the effect of UK sanctions on Russia on the UK, but anyway, okay. This is the organization that they've set up, the Office for Financial Sanctions Implementation at the Treasury. And so the numbers have come out of their annual review, which is covering April 2021 until August 2022. And so, of course, the propaganda pieces came out to explain us in numbers, the extent of the sanctions. 18 billion of Russian assets frozen, 1,200 people sanctioned, including 120 oligarchs, more than 120 businesses sanctioned, assets of 19 Russian banks. Frozen, Russia's GDP predicted to decline by 6.2% in 2022 compared to pre-invasion trend. Russian imports of critical goods dropped by 68% from sanctioning countries. 60% of Russia's foreign reserves immobilized, and over 1,000 foreign businesses have left Russia. And Patrick, you're going to have to, just put that back up on screen 1 second, Stephanie, thanks. Patrick, you're going to have to explain to me how Russian imports of critical goods, having dropped by 68% from sanctioning countries, is a good thing for sanctioning countries.
Well, it depends if they want reliable and affordable supplies of goods, of energy, of fuel, to balance their books, to run their economies, to be sort of in the red, as it were, or to be in the black, as it were. That's the question. So, is it a good thing to restrict markets and to create a bifurcated global economy by cutting out Russia, which is the world's largest overall basket of commodities producer in the world? We're talking about fuel, agricultural products, rare earth minerals, etc., all sorts of stuff in this sort of chemical and agricultural industrial complex. Russia is a main supplier to so many of these different sectors. So, and energy on top of that. Is that something that's good for these countries' economies? And to pay, I don't know, 4 times the price for liquefied natural gas to be transported across the Atlantic Ocean by boat, with lots of disruptions in supply and things like that? Is that something that you can run the first world economy on? That's the question.
Very good question. Now, Vanessa, let's come back then to Israel and Iran.
A couple of days ago, there was an attack on an Iranian oil convoy that was coming in through the Iraq-Syrian border at Al Bukamal. There is some contention over who carried out the attack. Initially, it was believed to have been a United States attack. Now it's more likely to have been an Israeli attack, with the usual claim that the tankers contained weapons and were being sent into Lebanon. The reality, of course, is the 2 tankers that were destroyed were carrying much needed oil reserves for Lebanon, which is at the moment extremely energy deprived, of course, following the port explosion in Beirut a couple of years ago. And 25, well, there are numbers between 15 and 25, but the latest being 25 Syrian Arab Army soldiers and civilians lost their lives in the attack. So the illegal aggression against Syria and against essential civilian supplies continues by Israel.
Yeah, and just very briefly, Vanessa, what if we were to compare the energy situation in Lebanon with Syria at the moment, which country is worse off?
I was just in Lebanon last week. I would say actually they're on a par from an energy perspective. from an economic perspective, Lebanon is actually doing far worse than Syria. To give you an idea, Lebanon now, the Lebanese currency is at more than 30,000 to the dollar. In Syria, we're at around 5,000 to the dollar.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. If you like what the UK column does and you would like to support us, then please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there. You could pick something up at the UK column shop, but please do share material you find on the various platforms as far and wide as possible. I just want to give a quick advertisement to the Children's Health Defence Europe, who are holding a press conference on Monday. That's 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central European time, so that'll be 9 a.m. it starts in the UK. This will be pushed out on the UK column website on Monday if you want to watch it. Well, what are they saying about it? Well, basically, they're saying that there have been too many safety indications that clearly demonstrate the unnecessary harm and death caused by a vaccine, in inverted commas, which is admittedly ineffective and has been stopped in some countries due to the surfacing scandalous revelations related to the procurement and approval procedures. And so they're hosting a press conference because it's basically a call for action on this. Participating will be, amongst others, Catherine Austin-Fitts, Dr. Meryl Nass, Dr. Mary Holland, Professor Sukrit Bhakti, Wolfgang Wodarg will be there as well. So keep an eye on the UK column website for that on Monday. Okay, Patrick, let's move across the United States then and the midterms.
So the U.S. midterm elections on Tuesday. I don't know how the coverage has been in the UK and elsewhere, but we're going to look at the aftermath of the midterms. So the results are almost in. Everything's kind of still in flux. We'll show you what's still left unaccounted for, but this is the problem that we're facing. So the red wave didn't actually materialize. It actually was a red ripple. So Democrats are doing a victory lap because it wasn't as bad as expected. So we'll break that down a little bit, but this is going to have huge implications, not just in the U.S. but also globally as well. Let's just take a look. This is the U.S. Senate map here. This is Real Clear Politics. So there's still 3 Senate races left to be decided. One of them is Nevada. They're slow walking the votes in Nevada, and the other is Arizona. That's where the big controversy is. This is where I am right now, at the epicenter of all this controversy in Maricopa County, Arizona. And Georgia is yet to be decided. That's going to go to a runoff between the Democrat incumbent Raphael Warnock and the Republican challenger Herschel Walker. That's going to be on December 6th. Now you can see where the land lies here. The Republicans have a 1-seat edge right now. It's likely that the Republicans are going to take Nevada, take that Senate seat. If we go back to the U.S. Senate, please.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Right.
Yeah, thanks. So Nevada is going to take that Senate seat for Republicans. It's likely, although not certain, the way things are going with the vote counting. Arizona, the Democratic incumbent has the lead, Mark Kelly, over the challenger, Blake Masters, a Republican. But the votes could come in at the last minute and change that. But at the moment, that would leave the Georgia runoff to be decided. If the Republican Herschel Walker loses, it would go back to a tie in the U.S. Senate. And the tie-breaking vote is with Kamala Harris, the vice president, who is a Democrat. If they win in Georgia, it'll be likely a seat majority for Republicans. So that's what we're looking at here. Again, it could change 1 or 2 seats, but so it's a tie or a Republican majority in the Senate. Massive implications for U.S. foreign policy, but also a lot of domestic policy issues as well. So that will decide where the country's headed. Now, for the House of Representatives, the Republicans were a massive margin. We're talking about 20 to 30 seats. That's what the polling looked like in the election. It didn't materialize. So there's still around 26 seats still outstanding the votes. And so the margin's going to probably look like, and a lot of those seats in California, for instance, and also there's some in Arizona and elsewhere. So what's that mean? There's probably going to be a Republican majority, but it's going to be a slim majority. It's going to be sort of 8 to 10 seats. Now, what does that mean? Well, we'll explain to you what that means a little bit later, but suffice to say, that's bad news for the Democrats. It's going to handcuff Joe Biden for the next 2 years if Joe Biden survives. The governor's races, as you can see in gray here, those two states in gray, dark gray, that's Nevada and Arizona. Those are two governor's races yet to be decided. As well, there's still votes out in Alaska. So what does that mean? It might not mean a lot nationally, but if you consider Nevada and Arizona are two swing states that could do major election reforms with their new governors and new senators, for instance, and other offices, that means that those swing states might be tightening up their election rules, and you won't see this 1 week of vote counting. We don't have in Arizona, we have election week or election month now. A lot of people are looking at this, scratching their heads, saying, what is going on? We'll show you some details of that. So here's the big controversy. It all began on election day. As soon as the polls opened, 30% of the voting centers in Maricopa County. This is the biggest county in Arizona. You can't win Arizona or decide an election unless Maricopa County is done counting its votes. And they had defective voting machines. So there were problems with the printing of the ballots. The scanners weren't picking it up. And it was also centered in a lot of Republican dominated precincts. So a lot of people are suspicious that there might have been foul play. What's going on here? The result is this potential disenfranchisement, voter suppression. That was literally at the beginning of play on election day, and it got worse from there. And so now we're in a situation where, and this is an article here, Arizona's elections are an international embarrassment, and there's commentary here that's worth reading from a few different commentators on this issue. But they're still counting the votes. There's still votes coming in, and we won't be able to call these races now, and they're talking about Monday. First, now it's early next week. So 48 other states have managed to figure out how to count their votes. Bigger states, in fact. Arizona, however, has this other system of running their elections. At the moment, it is a Democrat-run electoral system. The Secretary of State is actually running for governor against Kari Lake, Katie Hobbs. So she didn't recuse herself from this situation. So a lot of people are looking at this as a conflict of interest. But not only that, it's just not working. It's become an embarrassment nationally, and they're just basically burying their heads on this and saying everything's fine. The election commissioner who's in charge of all this, believe it or not, his name's Bill Gates, and Bill Gates is all over CNN saying everything's fine, it's no problem, we're just being extra careful. But you can see what they're holding up potentially the U.S. Senate in some kind of a result there. They're also holding this up for the state of Arizona. So this is, and the AG's in there as well, Secretary of State. These are state legislatures races. State legislatures are going to decide election rules as they do in each state. Huge implications, and nobody knows what the results are. And there's a lot of reports of problems and potential election fraud, mismanagement, stakes, whatever you want to call it, massive reports coming in all different shapes and sizes. And a lot of people are suspicious, considering this was the epicenter of the 2020 electoral scandal as well. So all these people were called election deniers, and now they've been vindicated in a way because of this debacle that's unfolding here. So Kari Lake is running for governor. She's in the middle of all this right now. I think we have a clip from her, and she kind of explains where things are at from her perspective.
There are over 620,000 ballots left to be counted. More than 380,000 of them, Chris, are people who took their early mail-in ballot, didn't want to mail it, didn't want to use one of those drop boxes. They chose to walk it up on election day to a polling place and hand it to a poll worker. And these are people who are going to go heavily Republican, and they have not been counted yet. The vast majority, we believe, of these votes left to be counted are going to go heavily in our favor, and they haven't been counted. Maricopa County and Arizona has been slow to count their votes. Once again, Maricopa County slow rolling the results, and it's it causes problems. It causes distrust in the system, and it really it hurts the whole country. Everyone's waiting to find out, will Blake Masters pull out a victory? I believe he will. I'm 100% certain we're going to win, but we need to get a system in place where we actually have results on election night. This is ridiculous. I've been sounding the alarm since 2020 with that election, which had major problems, and nobody wanted to talk about it. They called me an election denier. Well, here we are, 2 more elections since then, including the primary and this one, and we have the same problems. We can't have Arizona constantly holding the entire country up with election results. And when I win, when they announce my victory, and I think it will be soon, and we're going to win handily, we're going to get to work to restore faith in our elections.
So that's fighting talk from Kari Lake. She's a Republican in this race at the moment. It's 50.3%, and Katie Hobbs, a Democrat, and 49.5% Kari Lake. That's with 78% of the votes turned in, supposedly, depending on the reporting is not super accurate. It really depends on who you trust on the reporting. So we'll see what happens. Who knows? Anything's possible in this kind of electoral environment. That's all I'll say. It's very uncertain what the results will be, although she's very confident, Kari Lake, that she's going to win, that those are all Republican votes hanging to be counted. But in this kind of environment, it's completely chaotic. There's a lot of things being said, a lot of things that people just don't know, and there's still truckloads of ballots appearing from these different districts. The problem here, Mike, is that Arizona, because of COVID-19 and other policies, are sending out massive mail-in ballots. They don't know how many ballots are out there. And so then you get these returns. There's a lot of due diligence that needs to happen, signature verifications. I think it's probably going to be rife for fraud just because of the scale of the mail-in ballots. This is what people have been warning about for years. And the one side it tends to favor mail-in ballots is the Democrats, because statistically more Democrats are voting early and by mail. More Republicans want to go in on the day and cast their vote. So you can see the schism that's been created here. And so the other thing that is because of COVID, they got rid of local precincts and they did these massive voting centers, they call them. So less places to vote, bigger voting operations. But as you know, when you centralize everything, if there's any problems in the design, the management, or the administration or technical, it reverberates more quickly through the system, and you can't locate the problem, funny enough. And so getting rid of local precincts and things like this, that's an accountability issue as well. So a lot of people want to go back to paper ballots in Arizona. Certainly the rural counties are pushing that in the courts. But Maricopa County is in a world on its own, and is very much a partisan fight here between Democrats and Republicans to wrestle control over a lot of things, including election processes. But let's look at some of the big takeaways of the midterm elections here. J.D. Vance won his Senate race in Ohio, and you have to realize this is a best-selling author who wrote a book, Hillbilly Elegy, about sort of lamenting the demise of the Rust Belt and working class America. He's gone and run for Senate, a total political novice. He's won, and that's a big win in a state like Ohio. And that used to be a swing state, and it's very much a Republican state now. So that's a major sort of thing, and you're going to see him as a kind of intellectual now in the Senate. So there's a different kind of breed of politician. There's a few other people, young people like this, newcomers into politics on the Republican side, citizen politicians, they're called. Some were successful, some made it in, some didn't, but ran very strong races, like Tiffany Smiley for governor in Washington, and there's some others as well. Kari Lake, you could probably put in that category too. Her race is yet to be decided. So that's a big takeaway. That's something new in American politics, and some people would say interesting, maybe even exciting. But the big one here in terms of trends, changing the electoral map, is Florida. What Ron DeSantis romped home to an incredible victory, like a landslide which has never been seen before, especially in a state like Florida, which used to be regarded as a swing state, but now it's changed. How did it change? so quickly? That's the question. And let's take a look at the result here. I mean, a complete landslide, a blowout of Charlie Crist there. And I think Charlie Crist, former governor of Florida as well, just got destroyed. They even lost a Democrat stronghold like Miami-Dade County, decades, a Democrat lock, major population center in South Florida. It's now Republican. Latino voters fleeing the Democratic Party, fleeing the woke agenda and all of this stuff, going into the Republican camp. So they've changed it. This is no longer a swing state. It's an extinction level event for Democrats in Florida. I don't even think they have a national office in the whole state now. This is unprecedented. What does this mean? That means it's going to really alter the presidential race in 2024. So Florida, Texas, Ohio, Virginia, the congressional seats in Virginia swinging Republican. That's 100 plus electoral votes just with those 4 states that are locked in for Republicans in 2024. So this is like new territory for American politics, at least in this era. So that's something interesting. But here's the real demographic on Florida. Look at this. What does that say? Men aged 18 to 29, 61% voted for Ron DeSantis. So that sort of confounds the Democrats' kind of strategy or the demographics you'd associate with liberal ideas, liberal policies. So what does this mean? This is this freedom agenda that Ron DeSantis has been pushing in Florida, making it a haven for lockdowns or people fleeing vaccine mandates and things like this, and sort of woke indoctrination of children in schools, creating a sanctuary for these things in Florida, and zero state income tax as well. It seems to be appealing to that age group. Could that trend go national? In other words, would other governors adopt similar policies? Looking at these numbers, that's the thing you got to look out for. That could fundamentally alter politics in the United States going forward. So I think we have DeSantis gave a victory speech that shocked a lot of people. How some might call aggressive, but he really hit out at the kind of woke ideology in a way that nobody's ever heard before, and with the results of the election behind him on this. So let's go ahead and listen to this. It's incredible.
And so today, after 4 years, the people have delivered their verdict. Freedom is here to stay. We saw freedom in our very way of life and so many other jurisdictions in this country wither on the vine. Florida held the line. We chose facts over fear. We chose education over indoctrination. We chose law and order over rioting and disorder. Florida was a refuge of sanity when the world went mad. We stood as a citadel of freedom for people across this country and indeed across the world. States and cities governed by leftist politicians have seen crime skyrocket. They've seen their taxpayers abused. They've seen medical authoritarianism imposed, and they've seen American principles discarded. The woke agenda has caused millions of Americans to leave these jurisdictions for greener pastures. We have embraced freedom. We have maintained law and order. We have protected the rights of parents. We have respected our taxpayers, and we reject woke ideology. We fight the woke in the legislature. We fight the woke in the schools. We fight the woke in the corporations. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
Strong words. So I think there's going to be some people not happy about that, and especially looking at his result. that huge victory, landslide victory, and that's the platform. It's a pro-freedom platform. So this is going to be very interesting going forward. Now we'll talk about that. Ron DeSantis has now positioned himself in pole position as the kind of top Republican potential candidate for the 2024 election, is creating a rub with Donald Trump. But here's a good piece here in the tablet, and it's the headline is the status quo wins. And just a snippet here, assuming that the House is captured by Republicans, it's likely to do that with or without the Senate. It's clear that the progressive policy agenda, the progressive theory of American partisan politics, and progressive theory of American Constitution are now quite dead. So this is interesting. There's a lot of indications here that the Democrats are going to be forced to the center. They're going to have to abandon a lot of these things that have been that are going to be a disaster going into 2024. So here's the big question: Nigel Farage, former Brexit leader in the UK, he was saying this: there's a titanic clash coming between DeSantis and Trump. Trump's already trolling DeSantis on social media, and there's a little bit of an internecine war going on in the Republican Party now, and the toxicity of Trump that some Republicans are calling here the media. It's time he steps down. The Real Clear Politics published an open letter. Donald, it's time to step down. You've got to make way for the next generation, the new young leaders like Ron DeSantis. Trump's threatening, saying, no, 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 I'm not going anywhere, sort of thing. He's supposed to announce his presidential run on Tuesday, and to great fanfare. But this result in Florida has caused a little bit of big rift actually within the party. So might be interesting. The competition could be healthy for the Republican Party, but this is the big talk now. Where is it going to go? I think it's generally healthy for the conversation in America. So going on here, just an interesting side note here, John Fetterman, who we talked about previously, who's suffering from a mental disability after a stroke. He won his race for the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania, and more or less tracking pretty much how Joe Biden performed in 2020 in that state. Now, why is this significant? This is obviously an important Senate pickup seat here, but he had a noticeable disability where people were calling into question his cognitive abilities and so forth. So, and yet he was still pushed over the line by Democratic voters. So very cynically, many were saying that, we don't care what his sort of physical condition is, that, he's basically, we're going to have him anyway. So here's an image here to take a look at in the next image. So that's John Fetterman on the left-hand side, and that's Tony DeLuca. Tony DeLuca, what are these two people here are kind of indicative of where Democratic voters are. John Fetterman, with his unfortunate disability, still voted in as a U.S. Senator, a very important job, very demanding job. And Tony DeLuca, a state legislature veteran, a Democrat. DeLuca died 2 months before the election, and they still voted him in. So, and we go on to the headline: Pennsylvania Democrats elect a dead lawmaker to their state legislature. And so that's just the ultimate in terms of where things are at. That's kind of in a nutshell tells you what we're going to call this hyper partisan tribalism and pure power politics. And this isn't the only race actually. And here's what the Democrats said in Pennsylvania: we're incredibly saddened by the loss of Representative Tony DeLuca, but we're proud to see voters to continue to show their confidence in him and his commitment to democratic values by reelecting him posthumously. A special edition will follow. I mean, this is just unbelievable. But that tells you, that it doesn't matter they don't care who's running. It's kind of making a mockery or a farce of the whole sort of democratic process. And that's not the only one here. Just go to this Newsweek article, a full list of dead people who won their elections on Tuesday. So it wasn't the only one, although he was probably the most high-profile case. But sadly, he died of lymphoma. A great tragedy, and a very popular and by all accounts, a wonderful man in the Pennsylvania state legislature. But he did pass away well before the election, and they still put him in. So that's going to mean there's going to have to be a special election. So this also happened in San Diego with the Chula Vista district there. The Democratic Party had their nominee, who's Simon Silva. He died before the election as well. They pushed, knowing that there's going to be a special election. That's a way to kind of eliminate, at least temporarily, the Republican challenger by electing the person who has actually died. So it's kind of a cynical strategy electorally, but it's completely legal, and it's been done more than once in this election cycle. That tells you something about where American politics are at. So, speaking of animatronic, not fully compos mentis dolls and politicians, Joe Biden has been given a breath of new life because the damage just wasn't as bad as a lot of people anticipated. So Joe's kind of with a confident stride. He's a bit cocky. He's taking his time, of course, during his press conference afterwards, but kind of a victory lap, as it were. But really, it's a stay of execution, in my opinion, and other people's opinion. This is just kind of a temporary situation he's in where it wasn't as bad as people expected. So the knives aren't out yet for Joe Biden from the Democrat Party and the media, but give it time. And the race in Georgia and also the results of Arizona, Nevada, but especially the runoff in Georgia, that's going to decide. If they lose the House, there's no cause for victory. They would have lost the House and the Senate, the Democrats. And so that means Joe Biden is an ultimate lame duck, handcuffed, and he'll be tortured by Republicans for the next 2 years if he survives. He says he's going to run. He said so in the press conference yesterday. But we've got here is him being asked whether there's going to be any changes to any of these policies that have hurt the Democrats in this election and going forward. And listen to his answer. It's incredible.
In fact, 75% of voters say the country is heading into the wrong direction despite the results of last night. What in the next 2 years do you intend to do differently to change people's opinion of the direction of the country, particularly as you contemplate a run for president in 2024?
Nothing, because they're just finding out what we're doing. So I'm not going to change anything in any fundamental way.
So yeah, he doesn't see anything wrong. It's all good. Biden's happy. The Democrats. So I don't think any lessons were learned here. So what is a Republican House of Representatives going to mean for the Biden administration, for the country? Let's take a look. It's going to mean, firstly, investigations. There will be probably House investigations and maybe Senate hearings in Hunter Biden, his international business dealings, Ukraine, China, the laptop, all of it. The FBI has been labeled as a kind of partisan bouncer for the Democratic Party. That's going to come in front of Congress now, and most likely there's calls to by some people in the U.S. government to defund or break up the FBI, to get rid of it, to scrap it. It's just become a monster, a partisan monster. And the recent leak by The Intercept, where they're working with big tech firms, meeting with big tech, DHS, FBI, to censor Americans, users on the major platforms, Facebook, Twitter, etc., LinkedIn, all of it. That's got a lot of people really worried about the direction of the federal government under this administration. So that big tech censorship, that's going to basically come, I think, in front of a major forum there, and there's going to be a reckoning there. And also with COVID. Now the COVID thing could go either way. It could go into sort of lab leak territory, i.e., Rand Paul origins of COVID. That to me would be a waste of opportunity for the Republicans. So the question is, what are they going to do with this power if they get it? Are they going to capitalize? Is it going to be something meaningful, or is it going to go into sort of a a controlled opposition kind of black hole that sucks all the energy and opportunity and people's animus and anger, whatever, and just diverts it. So we'll see whether they deliver and substantially on any of this stuff. It's also going to mean impeachment for Joe Biden. There's probably going to be an impeachment in the House. Probably he's not going to be convicted in the Senate. So it'll be more of a sort of uh, kind of political circus, as it were, much like with Trump. but maybe with a little more substance. With Biden, he is implicated in a lot of things, and there's actual evidence to bring a case against him. Alejandro Mayorkas for the open border fiasco, the DHS secretary appointed by Biden, he will most likely get impeached as well. There's a few other people that might be on the chopping block, including the head of the CDC, Walensky. And the vaccine issue may or may not come into play here. And I don't know if it will. The establishment's very strong in protecting big pharma, so I'm not holding my breath, and I don't think many people are. The economy, a Republican House is going to look to act to control inflation. That means no more giant spending bills, no COVID relief, no Biden student loan bailouts, and all these things to buy votes ahead of the elections, and sort of massive spending, quantitative easing, stimulus bills, multi-trillion dollar spending packages, the things that made Nancy Pelosi the sort of the queen with the gavel for the Democrats, and the cause of inflation. That's going to come to an end. The other thing, they're going to put the brakes on green energy and Great Reset, Build Back Better policies. That's going to be very hard. Congress controls the power of the purse, the spending. They're going to rein all that in, and they're going to handcuff Biden and the Democrats and things like this. Nancy Pelosi's political career is over. You will hardly hear a word from her or see anything from her now. She's basically a lame duck, normal congressional rep from San Francisco with very little power going forward. And the other thing is Ukraine. And this is the big thing internationally. A lot of Republicans do not want to write a blank check to Kiev. They don't support it. They don't want it. In fact, there's calls from people like Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky, who won a huge mandate in his race, 61%, very similar to Ron DeSantis in terms of margin of victory. He wants to audit every penny that goes to Ukraine, everything, wants to know where every dollar is going. And so there's a lot of resistance from a Democrat-controlled House. That could change under this new regime here. The other thing is the Republicans will more likely want to pursue diplomacy in Ukraine. So the White House's position of an ongoing open-ended proxy war, don't negotiate, don't sue for peace, that might sort of shift now with the Republican-controlled House. So big implications there from the foreign policy. Now, regarding the Hunter Biden investigation, here's Joe Biden's reaction when he was asked about this yesterday.
My final question. Republicans have made it clear that if they do take control of the House, that they want to launch a raft of investigations on day one into your handling of Afghanistan, the border. They want to look into some of your cabinet officials. They want to investigate you. They may even want to investigate your son. What's your message to Republicans who are considering investigating your family, and particularly your son Hunter's business dealings?
Lots of luck in your senior year, as my coach used to say. Look, I think the American public want us to move on and get things done for them. And, I heard that there it was reported, whether it's accurate or not, I'm not sure, but it was reported many times that Republicans were saying, and the former president said, how many times are you going to impeach Biden? Impeachment proceeding against Biden. I mean, I think the American people will look at all of that for what it is. It's just almost comedy. I mean, it's,
So Joe struggled through that press conference, but anyway, you can kind of see it's comedy. It'll be comedy for him, he thinks, I guess. But what they did is try to impeach Donald Trump twice previously. So I think he's going to get one. They're going to get at least one look at Biden on one of these things. So the other thing is Ukraine. So Zelensky has gone on a PR offensive with Christian Amanpour and CNN and had this big sit-down interview. And he's worried that Republicans are going to cut off the money to Kiev. He's really scared. He's really worried. Look at his face and look at what he says. He's making an appeal directly to the American people, saying, don't listen to your politicians. You're the people. You need to give me the money. Here's the clip.
I want to ask you, because you're both sitting here with me at a time when the Americans have had an important election, midterm elections. It looks like it's not a massive, massive wave, But I wonder whether you worry that there may be donor fatigue in the West, maybe in the United States, with the economic pressures. Maybe if some Republicans say no more blank check for Ukraine. You've had a lot of American visitors here in these last few days, senior from the administration. Are you assured of America's continued support and Europe's continued support?
Ми б дуже хотіли, щоб не змінилось.
We would really like for the support, especially the amount of support, to stay the same, and to have this joint support from the US society and, above all, US taxpayers, because at the end of the day, this is not the money of the government, but the money of the people.
Підтримці двопартійні, двопалатні.
I noticed there, Patrick, he was speaking Ukrainian, and I wondered if you got any thoughts on why he was doing that. Obviously for the American audience, but as we saw earlier with the video with Sean Penn, he's quite capable of speaking English if he wants to.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. It depends. It depends. I think Vladimir Putin speaks fluent English, but rarely does so when doing any diplomatic presentations or interviews. Maybe it's because they can go more nuanced into their native language they can't do when they're speaking English. Who knows? But the cheek of this guy to basically say, well, the U.S. taxpayers, you need to pay us. You need to send the money. So the bill they're talking about is $4 billion a month going forward. Indefinitely, and the tab's going to be picked up by the EU and the US combined. Well, the EU doesn't have any money, and I don't think any member states. There's not a lot of appetite for this from member states, especially going into this winter. So they're really relying on the US to provide that. And as I've explained, I don't think that's going to happen. So there might be some aid or some money or some support, but it's not going to be to the scale that he's expecting, and all that money that's being laundered through there into Switzerland and these other places. Who knows where this money is ending up? But he's basically looks like he's wanting to pad his mattress in with the inevitable result, which was he will be fleeing from power at some point in the near future. I don't know how many times he's going to be able to delay an election in the country and have to explain to the public or whatever that this thing has been a total disaster for Ukraine. But so this is kind of laughable, and Vanessa showed the Sean Penn thing. I'll just throw that up on screen here. So Sean Penn, who visited El Chapo as well, and this Oscar thing, Penske and Zelensky. This kind of just says it all. An award for the best actor in a proxy war goes to Zelensky. You can see the veins popping on Sean Penn there. I think he's gone away for a few months and got his hormone replacement therapy there, and he's ripped, and he was ready to come back to Kiev for that photo op just to flex right there on the camera.
Yeah.
What an absolute maniac. But the big takeaway from the U.S. midterms, I'll say, this is regarded by many as a referendum on Trumpism, and there's this internal debate. This power struggle is going to go forward now with the Republican Party, but I think that's going to energize the 2024 election. I don't know who's going to be the nominee, but still, I think Donald Trump is in the catbird seat. But you've got a major challenge now for leadership. What's that going to mean politically in the U.S.? It's going to be very interesting, is all I'll say.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Patrick. Right, Vanessa, let's come back to the UK then. Well, we're just going to come back to the Mariana Spring story and the Richard D. Hall story. And here's the BBC, the UK terror survivors tracked down by disaster trolls.
Yeah, I mean, the wording in this article is very typical of Mariana Spring and what I call all these very young disinfo babes that are rising up through the ranks of the BBC. This is basically an article attacking Richard D. Hall for his investigation into the Manchester bombing. People can go and read the article, so I'm not going to go into huge depth about what his investigation has entailed. One point that I'll make from this excerpt is the sort of the dislike, if you like, that this disinformation conspiracy theorist, of course, that's immediately how he's portrayed, had more than 16 million views and 80,000 subscribers on his YouTube. There is always this element of, on the one hand, trying to dismiss those that challenge establishment narratives, as in my case, as an obscure blogger, in Richard D. Hall's case, as a conspiracy theorist, a disaster troll, etc., but while having to grudgingly accept that through our work, we have acquired influence, and this is what they are fighting back against. So let's look at this section. So she talks about, for the past 5 months, I've been looking into conspiracy theorists. So we're again into the conspiracy framing, conspiracy theorist framing tactic. But then let's look at the connection to the Alex Jones case. We've discussed this previously. Why was the Alex Jones case so extraordinary? Well, here we go. These types of conspiracy theories and the abuse they inspire. So again, we're back onto the online harms. We're back onto the upset of the Sandy Hook victims, those upset by Alex Jones's investigation into what he considers to be a hoax attack. And the abuse that these conspiracy theories inspire echo those of Alex Jones, the US host of the Conspiracist show and website InfoWars, who this month was ordered to pay nearly $1 billion to families of the US Sandy Hook school shooting after falsely claiming the 2012 attack was a hoax. So here we see what's going on here. Mariana Spring is being instrumentalized effectively to push through policy like the online harms bill to crack down on conspiracy theorism, which of course includes that regarding vaccine injury, vaccine deaths, and the entire COVID pandemic hoax. Here we have Mariana Spring confronting Richard D. Hall himself. And there, underneath that photograph, you come across the survey which Mariana Spring bases a lot of her conclusions upon. It's a survey carried out of 4,000 people, weighted to be representative of the UK population. And if we move on, it's carried out by King's College London. Now, through my investigations into particularly Chloe Hadjimatio, another BBC producer who produced the BBC Mayday series, which, as I mentioned before, was really created to discredit those that had been exposing the role of the White Helmets inside Syria, but also the UK government's role in the destabilization project against Syria. She had also close connections to King's College London. Bellingcat, of course, Elliot Higgins, I can't remember exactly his title, but he again had close links to King's College. Now, what is this report called, or this survey called? Truth Under Attack. It's astounding, isn't it, that whenever we challenge what their version of truth is, it is the truth that is under attack, not that they could ever be accused of presenting untruths or disinformation or lying through omission. Now, who was responsible for this survey? A guy called Bobby Duffy, director of the Policy Institute, King's College London. So I had a quick look at who he is. This is from the King's College London website itself, King's People, Professor Bobby Duffy. Who is he? So as I said, he's the is professor of public policy, and director of the Policy Institute. He has worked across most public policy areas in his career of 30 years in policy research and evaluation, including being seconded to the Prime Minister's Strategy Unit. Now, which Prime Minister was that? None other than Tony Blair in 2001. He sits on several advisory boards, including chairing both the Campaign for Social Science and the Closer Advisory Board. So I need to take a deeper look into him, but he certainly seems to be very well connected to British government circles. So let's have a look at the survey itself. I'm going to kind of whiz through it, but people can find the link, I think, in our show notes, but also in the Mariana Spring article. So the vast majority of the public accept the reality of terrorist attacks in the UK, but notable minorities say they struggle to know what to believe or think we don't have the full picture. Now, what I do find very encouraging about this survey, Mike, is that there is a growing insistent minority that are refusing to accept government line on virtually anything, actually. So this is looking at the 7/7 attacks. 1 in 8 believe the 7/7 attacks were probably a hoax, while 1 in 6 thinks attacks like 7/7 in Manchester did happen, but were not carried out by terrorists. So for me here, there is healthy questioning going on about whether the government, whether the mainstream media is telling the truth. Then of course, what do they try to do? They try to determine who are these people who are questioning the establishment lines. So first of all, they say it's people that are disengaged politically. A third of people who didn't vote in the 2019 general election think the truth about the Manchester Arena attack is being kept from the public, and 1 in 5 think it was a hoax. More generally, people who get their news from social media and podcasts too are also more likely to think UK terror attack victims are concealing the truth about their experience. I think it's important to say here, people are not necessarily saying that these people are participating in what might be a false flag, it might be a hoax, but that these people are not necessarily entirely telling the truth about what happened. Moving on, sorry, where are we? I just wanted to go back to the one slide, actually, Mike, because what was interesting, and we talked about it last night, is if we look at this down in Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, people who would definitely believe that the government is concealing something, that mainstream media is concealing something from them, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, where we've seen the largest expansion of censorship on various issues, including, of course, on COVID, coming up to Telegram, which at the moment is far less censored than these three, right? And I take on board what you said, that we're being, to some degree, corralled into areas where we can discuss certain subjects, but that those areas are being narrowed down. For example, if we look now, Facebook is launching new tools to combat climate misinformation. So of course, we know that that's being streamed in to replace the 2-year-long COVID project narratives. But again, those who get much of their news from non-mainstream sources are more likely to have heard theories about US school shootings being fake. So again, the onus on social media, on independent journalism, on bloggers, on Substack commentators, YouTube analysis, etc., is being blamed for a public distrusting their government. Of course, it has nothing to do with the fact that their government has systematically lied to them for decades, which has taken us to war in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, etc., and has led to the COVID lockdowns and consequent economic downturn. Nearly a third of the public think that the UK government has covered up terror attacks, while a quarter believe that the US government either assisted in 9/11 or took no action to stop it. Again, what I'm actually finding in this survey is a very encouraging picture of people really starting to wake up to what is going on in their world. Over a third also think there is deep state or other secret groups that really control society. Again, healthy questioning in my view. A third say that the pandemic has made them more suspicious of official explanations of terror attacks. You can read that in many ways. But again, interesting that the pandemic, here, of course, he's accepting that the pandemic is a real thing. But he's not questioning why that would have made people more suspicious of official explanations, not only of terror attacks. More broadly, conspiracies about COVID itself are believed by a notable minority, again encouraging. The strongly accept group stand out as the biggest believers of specific conspiracies. So here you have, well, I mean, clearly, those that strongly accept the idea of government malfeasance or media or government-aligned media malfeasance. And then moving on, here again, the demographic between the groups. I recommend people go and look through this report for themselves. But interesting that here they're also drawing attention to ethnic backgrounds. So of course, then we kind of siphon into the usual dismissal of conspiracy theorists being fascist or alt-right or white nationalist, etc. So what, for me, I take away from this is, of course, from their point of view, this is all negative. What I take away from it is that actually this is a very positive review of the awareness within the public, within the population in the UK, of quite what their government is up to and how they really don't trust either the government or the media.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that, Vanessa. And Patrick, just very quickly then, let's just talk about Twitter and Elon Musk suggesting there are problems ahead.
Well, yeah, there's a kind of a warning going up. A lot of executives have fled, including some of the top sort of officers and so forth. Some of them have been kicked out or pushed out. But there's just talk. He's saying, there needs to be massive cost cutting here, or the company is going to go bankrupt. So what does this reveal? This is very interesting, and it's very much falling on from what Vanessa is talking about. Twitter is effectively a heavily subsidized, loss-leading political project. It has been for a number of years. So there was no attempt really made by the previous owners and the board to ever make it profitable, to ever generate any kind of revenue that would sort of cover its costs. So it's basically sitting there on the stock market as a kind of lost leader. It's a political project. It's a massive censorship farm that's honeypotted the national conversation. It's the digital public square, and it was being heavily censored systematically. Still to this day, they haven't fully stopped everything yet. I think it's probably a big job to deconstruct and unwind this thing. Even Tucker Carlson got a fact check slapped on him by Twitter for his reporting on the Arizona election. So, I mean, go figure. Right in the middle, in the heat of a huge controversy, he's being slapped with a fact check warning. A major, the leading sort of talk show host in America. That's still going on Twitter. It's a political project. It's a censorship farm, and they've proven to be working directly with government agencies. So Elon Musk, the new owner, is looking at this and basically saying this is not a viable business. However, I think he's just doing a little. He's shaking the blanket, as it were, to get some of the dust out. That if under new management, everywhere he's gone, he has made money. So if he turns this around, I have no doubt this is going to be a $1 trillion company. If Elon Musk has his way with this business and his partners for the next few years, they will go public again, and the IPO on Twitter is going to be huge if they do. So all of these people that put the money in to buy this company, they didn't do it out of the goodness of their heart or to altruism. I'm sure he is a free speech proponent, and in his heart, he probably is on a mission here. But the ultimate goal is to refloat this company and to put it on the stock market and to make it a $1 trillion company like Facebook and Google and the other big tech platforms. So that's what I think is going to happen. How soon that happens and what the timeline is for that, I'm not sure, but I think it's going to happen. And already they've made some changes that are going to make it profitable, or at least breaking even, if they can stay the course. But at the moment, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
He's taking a look under the hood here at Twitter. It's an absolute train wreck of a company that they're running. So it's a political project. and he's trying to transition it into something else.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. I'm going to be very interested to see how he does that once he starts hitting, legislation like Online Safety Act when it becomes an Online Safety Act, and also particularly the EU, of course, with their equivalent. So we'll see how that goes. Now, look, I just want to end with medications, medicines, and vaccines in particular. And let's just have a look at this cartoon that the MHRA pushed out this morning, because of course this is the end of a week of celebration of medicines by the MHRA, and this is really this is how they speak to the public. This is how they let people know that they should be making yellow card reports with their little cartoon characters. It is so condescending and patronizing. I don't even know where to begin. But in the meantime, what has the MHRA done? Well, today they've decided to approve the second Pfizer-BioNTech bivalent COVID-19 booster vaccine. Approval has today been granted by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency for a Pfizer-BioNTech bivalent COVID vaccine that targets both the original strain of SARS-CoV-2 and BA4 and BA5 subvariants. The vaccine has been approved for use as a booster in doses in individuals aged 12 years and above. And this decision has been endorsed by the Commission on Human Medicines. And then they go on to say that the decision is based on all available evidence on the original Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine and its adapted vaccines. This includes extensive safety and effectiveness data for the original vaccine, clinical data from the bivalent original Omicron BA1 vaccine, and safety data from an ongoing clinical trial. So they acknowledge in their press release that this is an ongoing clinical trial, and effectively the general public are part of that. So they finish off by saying these show that the common side effects, so the data that they have shows that the common side effects observed with the new bivalent vaccine were the same as those seen for other versions of the vaccine. These side effects were typically mild and self-resolving, with no new safety concerns identified. Well, of course, the reason that there are no new safety concerns identified is because they're ignoring the safety concerns and the clear evidence of safety disasters with respect to all the COVID-19 vaccines, and pressing ahead regardless. So I just want to end the program today by reminding everybody of the Children's Health Defence Europe press conference taking place on Monday on this issue. We'll have it on the UK Column website. Begins at 9 a.m. live, UK time, 10 a.m. European time, and it's taking place in Brussels. Please do watch that on Monday morning if you can. We'll be back in a couple of minutes with some extra, but otherwise we'll see you at 1 p.m. on Monday as usual. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you then.